bottom line.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline Powell, and I'll be your host for today's episode, which explores banking platforms in the context of commercial banking versus retail banking. Now, all things are not created equal, and certainly so when it comes to the world of banking. We have central banks, commercial banks, merchant banks, retail banks, credit unions, and development banks, just to name a few. So, simply put, while all will hold and lend money, they all trade and operate very differently based on the offerings and the needs of their customers. However, some banks will service both retail and commercial customers, and they'll rely on a single digital banking platform to serve their consumers, small business, and corporate customers. So, when it comes to their banking platform, it's essential to consider whether that one size fits all approach can genuinely meet the diverse needs and expectations between these two diverse customer bases. Now, some may argue that while the functional complexities of a corporate solution may be unsuitable for small business usage, the deficiencies of a consumer offering for a business may be less obvious. Now, to help unpack this conundrum, we welcome today's guest, Eric Campbell, a senior solutions consultant for North American banking at Bottomline. With over 40 years of experience in designing, building, selling, and implementing end-to-end banking and treasury management software, Eric clearly brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to today's discussion. Eric, welcome to the Payments Podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Jackie. I'm looking forward to this.
As are we. So, Eric, first question. McKinsey has projected that commercial banking will grow at a slightly higher compound annual growth rate than retail banking over the next 3 years. What strategic implications does this hold for the banks that currently use a single digital platform for both their consumer and commercial clients? How should they prioritize investments in dedicated commercial banking platforms?
Well, the answer to that question really depends on the bank's mission and strategy. If the goal is to focus on the consumer and not venture beyond micro businesses, then one platform strategy is the right one. If, on the other hand, the strategy is going after larger than micro businesses, then one must carefully examine if the one system in place or being evaluated will meet that target market requirements.
That's great. So just bouncing off your response there, could you elaborate on the specific technological differences that require separate platforms for commercial versus retail banking? How do these differences impact the user experience and operational efficiency?
Well, in many cases, the retail platforms resemble an ATM, right? They let you do balances, transfers, transactions, deposit, and that's sort of how they're architected. Customers' inquiries are usually on a one at a time account basis, and often severely restrict how users can more sophisticated inquiries, even one account transactions. This primarily is because in most circumstances, the retail banking application is performing real-time transactions directly to the back office, so the customer inquiries themselves have to mirror what the back office can provide. On the other side of the coin, commercial banking systems were designed from the ground up to support small, medium, large, and often multinational corporations. These systems have accumulated many years of building out functionality to meet the needs of a very wide variety of organizations. Trying to turn a retail application into a commercial application is simply not an exercise where the foundation was designed to support such an expansion. Some of the largest banks in the world have tried to do that. In one such case occurred when a retail part of the bank gained control of the IT spend and decided to undertake this commercial expansion to their retail system. 3 years later, after spending millions of dollars without a single live commercial client on the system, the bank was bought, the group disbanded, and the project was scrapped.
So how can a dedicated commercial platform provide a competitive advantage in attracting new commercial customers, especially those with global B2B needs and where they have relationships with multiple banks perhaps? Can you share some examples of how this differentiation has played out in the banking industry?
Of course. One of the key requirements that corporations depend on from their banks is the ability to impose restrictions on what a user can see, what a user can do, and how big a payment a user can approve. These rules for these user entitlements have an almost infinite number of combinations. This is because the management team or board of directors who decide what these rules should be did so without considering what the bank systems can actually do. If a bank system cannot meet the organizational mandates, the company must build manual systems around their banking systems, such as emails, spreadsheets, and even faxes. Although my wife would love to approve my payments on my home banking system, no such function exists, thank goodness. On the business functionality side, there are functions that are not part of a retail platform. Even something as simple as initiating a wire payment, a key for the commercial market, is not available on most retail banking systems. Not to mention large vendor payment batches, payrolls, and other ACH payments such as corporate trade payments and tax and child support payments. Many corporations have hundreds of users. The ability to efficiently manage these users is a critical requirement. Most retail banking applications only permit the bank users to manage customer users. I guess the most important thing to look at is how does the user experience manage hundreds of accounts, thousands of transactions, and thousands of outgoing payments while allowing the user to search through all this data to find what they need in the most efficient way.
Thanks, Eric. Digging a little bit further then, what are some other nuanced challenges that banks face when trying to adapt retail platforms for commercial banking needs? How do these challenges affect the bank's ability to meet those expectations of their commercial customers? Do they address fraud, as an example?
In the commercial space, a bank will be compared, their functionality will be compared against the top four banks usually in that market. How does that system compare to what those big banks can provide? If the system you provide doesn't compare to those systems in the way that's important to you, it's likely those corporate targets will choose a bank who can provide them. Fraud protection for consumers generally is confined to debit and credit card functionality. Personally, I'm not aware of retail bank systems integrating directly with fraud control systems. On the commercial side, there are fraud protection systems that are integrated directly in, and based on a combined fraud score, they can actually hold up the payment and keep it from going out the door.
Thank you, Eric. You've mentioned the importance of commercial platforms integrating with business accounting software, ERP systems, and the B2B fintech ecosystem. Now, how do these integrations enhance the value proposition of commercial banking platforms for business clients? What role do they play, if you like, in facilitating high value transactions and more complex services?
Well, the larger companies that have sophisticated ERP systems, treasury management systems, sophisticated accounts payable systems, receivable systems, whatever those things might be, want to use those systems. They've spent a boatload of money configuring those systems, getting them to meet the organizational needs that they have. And frankly, when they want to do payments and want to get information, they don't want to have to dial in and get it from their banks. They want to get it directly from the systems. So they're looking for really tight integration with their banking partners. Either starting off with file transfers where the ERP systems can get hourly or maybe half hour, every 5 minutes of new information that the bank has, or be able to initiate payments and approve payments directly with the bank from their ERP systems or accounts payable systems, and just having that information available to their own organization so they don't have to use the banking system for getting that information. So having that tight integration, whether it be through APIs, whether it be file transfers, is a very, very important factor in being able to win the large corporate business, because otherwise they'll just go to a bank that can do it.
With future proofing being a critical concern for CFOs, as was mentioned in Bottomline's last survey, what key features or capabilities should banks focus on when developing or investing in commercial banking platforms? I expect that they'll want to ensure they are certainly prepared for future technological and market developments, right? So, how do these investments impact the bank's ability to innovate and adapt to changing commercial banking needs?
Well, one of the things that's changed dramatically in the market over the last 20 years, and really over the last five, is typically the commercial banking applications. They were basically put in place. The clients went to pilot on them. They then went live on them. They then migrated clients onto them. And 10, 15 years later, they're on their own version because they can't do any upgrades because they spent all that time customizing, enhancing, fixing their base platform. So the key first question is, how often do the customers get to upgrade on the platform that they're running? And it's a question you should ask, frankly, of the users of that particular system, not ask the vendor, of course. And what you want to ask them is, how old is your system? When was the last time you took an upgrade? because your ability to future-proof something, unless you're taking new versions of the software, you're not going to future-proof anything because the software you have is on a 20-year-old base. And so if you want to future-proof it, you're going to have to do it yourself or spend a lot of money with your vendor to update your older platform. Now, it's really important that this is a super important time, right? Because right now, instant payment types are coming to reality. They're exploding in the marketplace. There's new compliance standards being imposed to better enforce existing travel payment rules and the ever-expanding threat of global hackers. You really have to be on a current version of the product. You really have to make sure that your vendor is investing in that product and that they are keeping up with the way the world's changing.
Eric, before we close out, I have one last question for you. If you're a bank that's currently running a retail banking platform and using that for your commercial customers, and you're now looking to move across to a commercial banking platform, what sort of things do you need to take into account next in order to make that move?
Well, I think if your first choice could be to look at the vendor you have today for the retail banking platform that you have and see if it can meet the requirements of the target market you're going after. If the answer to that question is no, then you obviously have to look somewhere else. If you're happy with your retail platform, then you probably want to look to put in a commercial platform that can basically augment what you have on the retail side so that you have the best system you can have for your commercial side and the best system you can have for your retail side. And you don't have to worry about mixing requirements of the two systems or taking requirements for one market segment over another.
And with that, we've reached the end of this episode. So, Eric, thanks very much for sharing your insights with us today on both the commercial versus the retail banking platforms. Appreciate your being here.
Thank you, Jackie.
And to our audience, thank you for taking the time to listen in. Catch us next time on SoundCloud, Apple, or Spotify. Until then.
Podcast from Bottom Line.